here we are. And yeah, like I'm using a new computer, so I'm trying to figure out where to look, like where to look at in the camera. Anyway, hi everybody. It's Gina from AetherFlows podcast, and I'm using a new computer, so bear with me. Things are a little different. But with me today is Sam Chandler, and he is a man with amazing stories and amazing encounters. I'm not really sure what they are yet because I don't, I just started talking to him. But anyway, let's hear what this guy has to say. I've heard nothing but amazing things about him, and yeah, that's that's it. That's you, Sam Chandler.
All right, so here we go. Okay. Yeah, I always struggle to find like a good starting point with this stuff because
Mm,
it um so where to start? So when I was a kid, I guess I'll
that's what
just
I was
start with
going to ask
childhood.
you. That's
Yeah.
what I try to ask people. I'm like, so how was your childhood?
Okay. It's funny, like building off that, I actually, like building up to this lunar eclipse, the past couple weeks, I've been like doing a lot of inner work, like shadow work and releasing a lot
Yeah.
of things, trying to find things. And so I actually went really deep inner child, shadow stuff because I've been trying to work on myself for like years now because that's all part of this working with
Mm,
Sasquatch people, star people stuff, right? That's kind of what they want us to do is like find ourselves, heal ourselves. That's kind of like their thing is to try to get us to connect back with our true self. And so I actually like came to a lot of realizations this past week about my childhood that I just never really thought about before. But so there's a 6 year age difference between my sister and I, and
mm,
she's like a younger sister. So I spent the first couple of years of my life kind of in my own world, just like playing with myself and my toys and like watching TV and movies. And um I think I did that a little bit too when my sister was really young. So I would say like for the first 10 years of my life I probably spent a lot of time by myself, watching movies and just thinking a lot, like doing just things by myself and not really talking to a lot of people. And I spent a lot of time in the woods. And I just never really thought about it, but it really was like a place where I just felt a lot of solace and like comfort. I could be myself and I didn't have any worries in the world. And like, I would just go like play in the creek, walk around in the woods, and I would just spend so much time out there. And I just felt so normal and natural and like I just belonged there. And I think that has a lot to do with where I was. I mean, I know that this was all part of my like my contract in some way, like everything that's happened to me. But so building off that, when I was around the age of 8, we moved up to Northern Virginia. My father's in the Marines, so we moved around a lot when I was a kid. We moved up to Northern Virginia, um, and we moved into this new house, and it backed up to the woods, and there was probably say like 100 acres of forest back in. We lived in the suburbs, but this area was like the woods was between two neighborhoods, and then it kind of followed a creek. And I spent tons of time back there. I mean, like most of my time. If it was weather was nice enough, I was outside. That was just my
mm,
place. And we had some neighbors, and my parents ended up getting to meet the neighbors, and we got pretty close to them, and found out that they had like a cabin in Canada, and it had been in their family for like generations, and it was like 5,000 acres on a private lake, and well, I say private lake. It was just all the land around the lake was purchased after it got logged in the early 1900s. So it was really kind of
mm.
valueless, like worthless, because it all the value according to the people that sold it was in the trees. And so
Right.
they got the land for super cheap, and it just kind of stayed in the family. So they asked us if we wanted to come up that year for the summer, and we were like, yeah, absolutely. And so we went up to this cabin, and so this was so long ago. This was in 1985. So this was kind of foggy timing. I don't remember if this event happened before we went to the cabin or after we got back from the cabin, but it was the same summer.
Mm.
I was in my bedroom one night, and it was it was late dusk, so probably 9ish, like the sun was going down or had just gone down, but there was enough light in the room that I could see very well.
Mm.
And I was laying in bed, and I remember like I heard something or just got like a feeling, and I looked over, and so I was laying in my bed facing this way. There was like I had a big desk, and then there was a dresser. And I looked when I opened my eyes and looked over the dresser, there was a like a young Sasquatch looking over my dresser at me. And it just smiled, and it kind of laughed like a like this, like this face. It was just like, and it made like a gesture like it was laughing, but there was no noise coming out of its mouth, right? So it was like, and it scared me to death. And
Mm.
it was young, and like my first impression of it was like Animal from the Muppet Show.
Mm.
I don't,
Right.
and because his hair was crazy and it was just like sticking out everywhere like young Einstein, and his mouth was so big. That was what I think made me think of Animal, because his hair stuck up and his mouth was so comically large when he opened it, that it just scared, like I just freaked out. And
Oh yeah.
I didn't scream or anything, but like I closed my eyes and I was just like panicking. And then when I opened my eyes up again, he wasn't there anymore. I never heard any noises the whole time. There was never a noise. And so that freaked me out so much that I shut every single, I think, because I had like instances before that where I was having things happen in dreams. I was having nightmares a lot. I think I had a kind of like a connection to spirit back then that
Mm.
I didn't really know how to manage. But when that happened, I just was like, nope, like,
Yeah.
no.
I had similar stuff going
Did
on.
you?
Mm.
Yeah, and so I'm finding this out too with a lot of people. It seems like when we're young, um, and if there's like a connection that's made, they want to like kind of make an impression on us, or just like plant a seed, of like, remember when you were a kid and we were there, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I had something. I mean, you might have heard the story already, but I'll just be really quick.
yeah,
I had a nighttime. Well, I grew up in a very small town called Mound, Minnesota, and it was known for the Native American mounds that the big, like very sacred mounds that were
mhm,
built. And I think they got pretty much bulldozed in the 1800s, and then
mhm,
a small town was there. But it was about 45 minutes away from Minneapolis, and I was very very young. My parents had bought their first house, and I remember there were some other weird things that happened, but I must have been about 3, and that was in like 1980. And there was a guy who would come and hang out with me, who taught me how to fly around the house. I remember just like stepping off the second floor landing stairway and just like floating around the house, being like, "Whoa, this is really cool." All the lights were out, and like I would go peek in on my mom and dad, and then we'd go out the back door and fly around in the woods. And he looked exactly like E.T., like from the movie E.T., the
oh,
extraterrestrial. But it
right,
was years before that movie had even come out. And
right,
so when I was growing up, I always just had this weird, very vivid memory. And I was like, well, I must have just mixed it up with the movie or something like that. But since, like in the past few years, I've come to the realization that, like, no, this was a real thing that happened along with all the other weird stuff that happened. And it wasn't just like in your imagination. I think they were just planting seeds in order for us to kind of like, you know, realize this years on down the road, that they've always been with us and they've always
yeah,
been kind of guiding us. So
totally.
yeah,
And
yeah.
no, I love that. Because yeah, I've had, there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of things that happened in my childhood that were like not cool like that so much, but just like visitations, by spirit, with spirit, in
Yeah.
like in during dream time. Excuse me. So I feel like there's always been something there. And this is something I've noticed with my both of my sons. When kids are born, they're super connected to spirit. when they're first born, right? Because that's when they're pretty much like as close to their true self as they will be in this life,
Mm.
because they're fresh human, you know, they're still themselves, they're still their true selves, and they're learning how to be human. And then so that's why they're still connected with, like, you were still connected, and there's not that
Mm.
like artificial barrier that's built up through like conditioning and programming and everything that we get through our society. And so they're still
Mass.
able to like, yeah, and they're still able to connect, and they have their imagination and, you know, like imaginary friends or whatever it is. But, you know, we know that's not imaginary. Those are, it's real friendships and communications that they're having. And then when
Hmm.
they get a little older, both of my sons, right around the time that that happened with me, I want to say probably 7, 8 years old, it was like their personalities shifted and they became like their human persona. You know what I mean? Like their
Yeah.
character that they're playing. And I'm sure it's a combination of like school and friends and just trying to figure themselves out and who they are in comparison to other people in the world, things like that.
Mm.
But like the conversations I would have with my sons back then, they would see spirits, they would just, it was like a normal thing for them. And my youngest son would just write things like, he made a board game as a project once for school, and he brought it home, and it was like, it was called From Head to Heart. And I was
Oh.
like, yeah, and I was like, what is that? He's like, I don't know, it's just a board game I thought of. And I was like, well, what's the rules? So he told me the rules, and it was like the game of life, but it was just moving from your head into your heart. And
Oh.
no, like
I
from
want to
what
play
I know,
that game.
I know it's so cool. And from what I know, like from what I've learned about, you know, all that type of stuff, I'm like, dude, this is, I don't know if he knew how important it was, like the messaging in it. One day we were sitting around the table. He was like 5, maybe 6 when this happened. And he was just drawing. He always used to love to draw. He drew, he was just drawing, being quiet. And then he showed me this picture, and it was a picture with, in the middle of it, it just said, "Life is love in your heart." And it just had like 20 or 30 little faces with different expressions like all the way around it. And I was like, dude, I was like, where did you get that from? He's like, I just thought of it. And I'm like, man,
That's
these kids,
incredible.
it is to me. And some, I know a lot of people would probably hear that and be like, that's just kids, you know, but I'm like, no, like these kids are here. These are old souls coming in to like change the world, you
Yeah.
know, and like,
Like crystal
so
kids.
yeah, indigo children,
Mm.
yeah, crystal children, rainbow children. Yeah, so Uh, and so I noticed that when they get a little older, we kind of drop out of that and we get into like our character, and we're just like the
Mm.
human character until we wake up and we have our spiritual awakening and realize, you know, like what we are again. And when I started to have that process was when I reopened myself up to that stuff. So going back to my 1985 story, I shut that down. That was it. Like no more connection with that side of stuff until around 2010. And you know, I did a lot of stuff. I lived in DC, lived in Richmond, and I lived in a lot of places. And I was like, man, I just keep living in all these haunted houses, not realizing that like,
Oh my gosh. I had the same conversation with I did an interview yesterday, I think it was. And yeah, I said the same thing. Throughout my 20s, I always just ended up in these like freaky haunted houses and had all these like gnarly experiences throughout
yeah,
my 20s.
right,
Yeah, that's funny.
yep,
Wow.
yeah. And now I'm realizing that it's me. Like I'm just kind of not, you know. But when you're in these houses, whatever's there recognizes that you're open to it, right? So it's going to come to you. And so
Mm.
I was always like, man, all these houses here are haunted. You know, and people are like, really? Like, what is happening to you? I'm like, oh, there's like a cat in the hallway. I went to pet it, but there was nothing there. And that woman
Mm.
walked through the living room, and we tried to burn sage in the den, and then it exploded everywhere. Do you remember that? You know, and
Yep.
anyways,
Yep.
uh, and waking up with oh man, what's it called when you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't move?
Oh, sleep paralysis. I had that happen a few
Yeah,
times. Like a
yeah, I had that.
big black shadow standing over me. Yeah, I've had that.
Yeah, I had that happen a lot, right? Or like waking up and knowing that something is right here, right? Like a face is
Yep.
looking at me, and I'm not going to open my eyes because I know it's going to happen. So I'm just
Mm.
going to lay here and pretend. So, yeah. So in that whole time, I was still going to the cabin in Canada. we would go 2 or 3 times a year, and that place was always my grounding point, no matter what was going on in my life, whatever craziness I was into in my life. Whenever I went back there, it was just, I got to reset, I got to ground and connect with, nature, and nothing mattered except for just being there, right? Everything else was just
Mm.
gone. So the week that I would spend there was just such a recentering process. But every time I would go there, stuff would happen, right? And we'd see spirits in the house. Things would get moved around. We'd just hear things in the middle of the night. I would go up there with a bunch of old military guys because my dad was in the military. And again, it was the same thing where like I was the youngest. I was the only son that would go up there. It was a bunch of like older retired military guys. And I spent a lot of time in the woods because they would hang out and, they would drink and just tell stories and laugh. And I would just get up in the morning and go walk around in the woods for hours. And all these things would just happen. Like I would be walking through the woods and I'd come up across like a thicket of trees and I'd just hear, "Don't go in there." Or I
Mm.
would get like those feelings of dread. Every time I talk about this stuff starts happening in my bedroom. So someone's over here
Oh
knocking on the
yeah.
wall.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. This guy, this lamp I have, every time I
Uh-huh.
end up talking, well, it's certain people, but it's mostly when it comes to like Sasquatch or
Yep.
spirit. When I talk
Yep.
to certain people, it'll start flashing. Yeah.
Whenever I start talking about things they want me to talk about, yeah, something over here just started clicking. Um, so yeah, I could go on for hours about the stuff that would happen. And eventually it was around 2010, I was like, look, I gotta stop being scared of this stuff and I gotta start like really I want to open back up to this stuff. So I went up to the cabin one fall and I was fishing one night and there was a full moon. Oh no, I'm sorry, I wasn't fishing this night. That was another story, which is a kind of a freaky story, but I don't have to get into that one right now. um, so I was taking pictures of the full moon, and I had got this new camera, so I was testing out all these like aperture settings and trying to get like a good shot because it was a clear night, full moon. I could see everything. So I was taking
Mm.
pictures of the lake, and to my left in the woods, I heard clear, crisp bipedal, huge bipedal walking through the leaves, right on the, and it was just like crunch, 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 and I was like, that was my, okay, we have Sasquatch up here. Like, and so then I think it was even that trip, they started smacking the side of the cabin right behind my head in the room that I was
Yep.
in. And so it was kind of like they were like, yes, we want you to, start looking into us. And so eventually I got into trying to figure out what was going on up there, figured out that there was actually Sasquatch sightings on the East Coast. It wasn't just a West Coast thing. Because this was in Ontario, Canada.
Mm.
And and so eventually I started to get enough nerve and enough bravery, like I got my courage up and I was brave, guy. So I was like, I'm gonna go out and camp by myself one night. And so one night after we had dinner at the cabin, I got all my stuff, I put it in the boat, and I took the boat out to the far end of the lake, set up a camp, put my hammock out, and I was it was this October, second week of October, and it was pretty chilly that night. So I got my hammock, I had my sleeping bag all zipped up, and I was sitting there listening to. Uh, there's two. There seems to be like two wolf packs on the lake. There's like a pack of red wolves that are on the north side of the lake, and there's a pack of like eastern timber wolves that are on the south side of the lake. And that
Mm.
particular night, they were really just heck howling. And I was laying in my hammock listening to them howling. It was like, this is awesome. Um, a little bit of a breeze, so I was starting to get a little bit of a chill. And then, so as I was laying there behind me, this big tree fell down. It was like crash, you know, and just a little bit I knew at that time from listening to people's encounters and things. I was like, okay, I've heard this before. I've heard this before in the lake. I've heard it in the woods in the lake. I always thought it was beavers, even if it was like way up a hill in the middle of the night. I just assumed it was beavers. I know beavers are out at night and stuff, but this was like, this just had a feeling to it, And I was like, this can't be a beaver. So, anyways, tree fell, and I got like kind of freaked out. So I just calmed myself down because I was like, you got to push through this fear. That was like my goal for this camp was like, you got to push through this
Mm.
fear that you have. And So I was laying there and trying to calm myself down, and I didn't hear anything else for like a minute or two. And then as I was laying there, I felt like a finger or something. And this is the thing that I don't know if this was actually a finger or if it was just energy that was being like, uh,
I think it's energy because I feel the same thing, except for it's like the entire top of my head at this
yeah,
point.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it could have been a
It felt
finger,
like
but yeah.
because that's what it felt like. So it felt like it was, and you know, again, because it was such a broad and like really forced in entry point. And so what happened was I felt that, and then as soon as I realized what was going on, I just felt this like energy rush through my body, and it went from like my head to my toes,
Yep.
and then it came back out of my head, and I heard, "Get out of here,"
Oh, wow.
and I was like, "No, I'm not. Like I'm here to push through my fear, and you're just freaking yourself out. So just keep, just keep doing what you're doing." I felt it again, and the energy came through a little bit harder this time, and it said, "Get out of here now." And I was like,
Wow.
"No, no, I'm staying. You're freaking yourself out. You can do this, So I'm laying there, and then it happened again. This time it went through, and it was just like I could feel it on like a molecular level, like a cellular level. It was like everything just was like boom, and then it came out
Mm.
top of my head again, and it said, and the voice said, "Get out of here now, or you're going to die." And I took that one a little seriously, and I was like, okay. I was like, okay, let's see how much more of this you can take. Like this is your goal. And so I'm sorry, I'm trying to. We got
It's
autumn
okay.
coming out now. Yeah. Um, and so in a hammock, so you have like a little pouch that the hammock kind of balls
Mm.
up into when you're not using it. Well,
Hmm.
so in that little pouch, I had my two-way radio, and the other one was down at the cabin in case the people at the cabin needed to get in touch with me or vice versa. So I had it in there just in case, and that two-way radio started going like, and that freaked me out more than anything.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
I would have been terrified.
screw
I would,
this. Yeah,
yeah.
I was like, screw this. And so I got up and I left my hammock. I left everything. I did grab my bag because it had my camera in it. It was like, it was like a $1,500 camera back
Mm.
then. So, I was like, I'm not leaving this. So I grabbed my bag. I left my hammock. I left my sleeping bag, everything. I jumped in my boat, took off down the lake. And so I'm riding down the lake, and it was a clear night. The moon was out, and it was like the sky was like this weird greenish hue, kind of just the reflection of, I think it was like the moonlight reflecting off the water of the lake, and it making the
Mm.
sky like this greenish color. And so while I'm riding down the lake in this 9 horsepower motor for about a mile, which took forever, it feels like it probably takes 30 minutes to go. Uh,
Yeah.
I felt like I was just waiting for something to come pluck me out of the boat. And I had seen like things in the sky before there, like lights coming out of the sky. We've seen light ships. So we've seen a bunch of orbs in the forest around there.
Hmm.
But I just knew I was just waiting for something to come grab me out of the boat and pull me up the whole way
Right.
back. But nothing happened. I got back to the cabin. I went back in my room and got in my bed, and or lay down on my cot or whatever, and went to sleep. And the next day went back and got my sleeping bag and my hammock. Um, but needless to say, that really got my attention, and so
So, did you ever find out who that was, or was it ever resolved, or did you just that was just one of the experiences?
so I have this weird thing. I have this hang up, and this is me. I want to go back to that place and ask who it was. I know I can
Mm.
ask now, but so that happened in 2012. In October, and then the following year, 1 year later, I went back. Okay, I probably should tell a story that happened in the meantime to kind of lead up to this, because this kind of all builds up to like one big story that is
Oh,
still
okay.
kind of continuing now. So to answer your question, I don't know exactly who it was. I have some ideas, but
Mm.
I have this thing. I haven't been back to that lake since 2016, and I'm really waiting to get an opportunity to go back there. And I want to ask there. I want to do like a whole thing. I want to spend a couple days out there, ceremonial-ish, and try to reconnect
Yeah.
with whoever it was. So when I got back I was living in Georgia at this time, just outside of Atlanta. And so when I got back into town, I really was like motivated to learn more about this. And so I started looking things up on the internet, trying to find some things. I found some YouTube channels. I was like listening to Blog Talk Radio because there really wasn't a lot of like podcasts back then. There was a couple forums and things. So I ended up finding a couple things that I liked. Found a couple Blog Talk shows. One of them was called Midnight Walkers, which
Mm.
was Alex Midnight Walker, and then Arla Williams was actually the
Arla.
co-host. And
I love. Oh,
yeah, and
I love Arla.
I didn't know her at the time.
Mm.
And come to find out, like after listening to a couple shows and thinking they were crazy because it was super woo at the time, and this was like
Right. Right.
2012 or so. And
Mm.
I was like, I started listening to it more, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can jive with some of this. This is my stuff. And then I found out that that show was like based in Georgia. Arlo was in Oklahoma at the time, but Alex, the guy who was doing the show, was in Georgia, and I was like, oh, so I was like, this is legit. They're here too. So I started going out in Georgia looking for spots, and like, um, I went to a spot with my wife one night. I just kind of was like looking for places to explore. So we found a bunch of state parks that were kind of around us. And we went to one night, and we got there like right maybe like 30 minutes before the sun was about to set. We got to where we walked down this gravel trail and got to where it got dark, and the trail got dark, like going down into the woods. And we both kind of
Mm.
stopped, and we were like, do we want to do this and get, when it's about to get dark? And we were both kind of like, no. And we turned around. And so to me, that was like a sign of like something's here, because it was just that feeling of, I don't want to go back there in the dark right now because I'm not familiar with it. So I
Mm.
went back there, and I was riding my mountain bike back there one day, and I was riding down these trails. I came across this like power line clearing and back into another section of woods. And when I got into that back section of woods, the energy completely changed. I mean, it was just
Mm.
like you could feel it. It was just like, oh, this place is heavy. Like this is like
Mm.
something's here. So I rode around. I went back home, and then I got my wife and my sons, and we went back there like a couple weeks later, and we just walked on the trail. And so we did the same trail. We walked it. We walked through the power line, or the power line clearing, got to the other side, and she literally within 100 yards of walking in, she stopped and she said, "Hey, babe, come here." And she was like, "Do you hear somebody walking behind me?" And I was like, "I thought I heard something, but I wasn't sure." She was like, "There's
Mm.
nobody there." And I was like, "Okay, well, just walk with me." And then so we're walking a little bit, and we can hear something walking behind us in the leaves, but there's nothing there. I mean, it was like
Mm.
we should have seen something. That's how close it was. And so she was like, "I don't like this area. It's got a weird feeling to it." And I was like, "All right, cool." So that was like an affirmation for me. I was like, "Okay, it's not just me." Like,
Yeah.
so while we were back there, we still heard the footsteps, and this blue jay started harassing us like out of nowhere. I mean, just like flying in all the branches right near us and like yelling at us and just squawking the whole time. She was like, "What's up with this blue jay?" And I was like, "I don't know." She was like, "I want to get out of this place." And I was like, "Okay." So we walked out. We crossed the path kind of loops around, and it crosses the power lines again, but a little bit further up, so in a different
Mm.
area. We crossed back over the power lines. It was totally different again. And she was like, "I don't know what is back there in that area, but I don't like it. I don't want to go back there
Right.
again." So I went back there again because I was like, I'm going to find out what this is. So I went back there and I started finding all these tree structures. And I don't remember if I noticed them before, but they just started appearing. So it was like all these trees were getting uh, pushed in these like patterns and all these things. And I was like, that's not normal. So in my head, I'm like, I feel like someone's back here because I could hear them walking, but I couldn't see them. And so I started
Mm.
talking out loud all the time. I go back and I'd be like, "Oh, I love this. I love the way you did this. I don't know how you did this tree structure, but this is really cool. And I love the way you took this tree and crossed them over, and they would wrap vines around parts to tie them to other trees." And it was
Mm.
like a really interesting thing. So one day I was back there and I was talking to them, and I was standing there and I heard uh, footsteps again. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to stand here now and I'm going to let them come to me because I usually walk around and they just follow me. So I just stood there and I heard footsteps coming. It was like crunch, crunch, crunch. And so I was looking, trying to see what was walking towards me. And then while I was watching behind me, another set of footsteps came up. It's like crunch, crunch, crunch. And so when I looked over to that one, another set from over here came walking up, crunch, crunch, crunch. So it was like three sets, three individuals was like slowly like coming up on me. And every time I would
Mm.
look at one, another one would come up closer. And they all circled me and they kind of they flanked me, and they were within, I want to say 10 feet. And they were just standing there and they stopped. And I couldn't see anything. It was just like completely like whoever it was completely invisible. And I just stood there and I said something like hi or hello, and as soon as I said that, I just got enveloped with this like love bubble.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so in my head, I have this vision of what it was. It was three like cloaked Sasquatch, and it was like their electromagnetic fields, like because their electromagnetic fields are enormous compared to ours. And so so there was three of them around me, and I was kind of in the middle of all of this, and they just like just I mean, it was like this love bubble that was like in me, it was outside of me, it was everything. It was so like palpable, and it made me
Mm.
cry, and I was
Yeah.
smiling and
That happened
laughing,
to me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was just so like,
Your connection's breaking up a little bit. I was
is
wondering
it?
if, yeah. I mean, the story's so great. I've just been listening to it, but yeah,
Oh,
you're
okay.
breaking up a little. All right. So we're back. Sorry, guys. We had a little tech difficulties, but anyway, so you were having an encounter with two beings and they love bombed you.
Yeah. So it was three actually.
Oh, three.
Yeah, so they triangulated around me. And yeah, so they hit me with this giant, like Brian Belan calls it a love zap, which makes sense to me. But it
Mm.
was just like if the air was made of love, and it was just everywhere. It was in me, it was outside of me. And so I got, super emotional, but I was like loving every bit of it. And it lasted for like, I want to say around a minute.
Mm.
And then it just stopped. And there was a message that was, you can go now. And I said, all right, thank you. But I never heard them leave or anything.
Mm.
I kind of I just walked out to the trail and just walked on the path. And then I remember I was so excited about it. And and understand, like, to this point, I still hadn't had a physical sighting of one other than the one when I was a child, right? So I
Mm.
was like, what is going on? Like all this stuff. And so I called my wife and I said, I don't know what just happened. I'm like walking on the trail back to my car and I'm like, I don't know what just happened. And I tried to explain it to her and she was like, when you were back where we were that one time, and I was like, yeah. And she was like, well, that's cool. Basically she was like, but I'm not going back there ever again. Um,
Right.
but I kept going back to that place and all this stuff happened. I went back there for years. I would go back there and I still never saw one back there. But I had so much stuff happen back there. I would hear them talk. They would, there's these it's an old state park that someone used to live on back in the day. And like 100 years ago. And so those
Mm.
old cabins that the family had are still there. And they never, the land never got passed down. So when the last living relative passed away, she gave the land to the state and they made
Mm.
it a park. And so those houses, the cabins that everyone lived in are still there. And there's certain places you would walk by the old dilapidated cabins and they had like metal roofs. And so when you would walk by and they wanted to let all the other Sasquatch in the area know that you were coming, they would smack the metal roof. So I would walk by and you just hear like whap, whap, whap on the metal.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
And so and I would hear them talk to each other, and so I would set up audio recorders, and I would hear them doing stuff in the middle of the night, but they just never let me see them, or I don't know
Mm,
if I just wasn't ready to see them or whatever. But I came to a lot of conclusions in that area. I feel like they had to stay cloaked because it was, I mean, we were 15 minutes outside of Atlanta. I mean, it was still a
mm,
very, suburban area. And so I think that's
right.
just like the normal mode they were in was being cloaked. And so going back to Canada, I went back the following year. So between this all happened in Georgia between when I had like the Kundalini kind of thing happen. I went back the year later and I was like, I'm going to go back to where I was camping that year. So I went back to where I was camping, pulled my boat up, and walk up to where I was in the clearing. There was like a little fire pit that I'd made in the clearing. And in the middle of the clearing, right underneath where my hammock was a blue jay sitting on the ground, dead. And it was laying on
Oh.
its back with its, I mean, it was fully intact. It was almost like it just kind of rolled over and died there. But I know
Mm.
it was gifted to me, and um, it was just laying on its back with its little feet up, and I just looked at it for a little bit, and it took me a while to make this connection. Um, but I've come to the realization now that I believe that it was a message saying that in Georgia when that blue jay was like harassing us and like earlier that year, it was a way of saying like we were with you there and here. It was like a connection of the two places.
Mm,
And anyways, so that tripped me out because I was like, how 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 are they there and here? Like,
mm,
and I obviously I know now like how it works, but back then I was like, I have no idea what that meant.
right.
But anyways, so yeah, that started off that whole thing. And yeah, so my path started off super paranormal, I guess, and just kind of weird. And then it's progressed into now I see them. Now I'm having sightings. Like now they're showing themselves to me.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, and it's been a really interesting, uh, peculiar path, but really interesting path. Yeah,
So you live in the Pacific Northwest now?
yeah. Now I
Is that
live
where
in
you are?
Oregon. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And so what's your relationship with them? Like how do you interact with them?
The groups out here.
Mm,
Um, okay. Well, so while I was in Georgia, that's when I met Arla,
mm-hmm,
and I met like this woman Ginger and Jonathan and Keith Bearden and a bunch of people. Keith and Arla kind of set up this thing where they would have campouts. So around 2014, I think, or 15, I got connected with them, and we would have these campouts, and we could do a whole show on the stuff that we used to have happen at this place.
mm,
Um, and it was about 30 minutes from my house. So come to find out, like we were all kind of interacting with the same groups, like a bunch of us in the area were interacting with the same groups of Sasquatch. And then they would come to this place and we would have all these crazy things happen. Like they would come into camp every night, they would just show us eye shine constantly. And there was like,
mm,
I mean, there were times where there was like three or four or five of them just hanging out, show us their eye shine. They would walk up to us and just like it was such a blessing, and I'm so grateful for those experiences because I was just close enough to it that Ginger and her husband Paul and I would go out there, and we would go out there like once a week and just experience these crazy things. Um, and eventually I ended up moving out here in 2017. And so it just progressed to a point where I was, I don't know how to explain some of this stuff, but you know how you just end up places in the woods,
yeah,
like all
I
these,
mean that's how I ended up here. I live in the UP of Michigan. It's like like 2 years ago I never would have thought. Never in a million years. I was in Detroit. I
right.
was a city person.
Yep.
Now
Yeah. Yeah.
I live in a village of 4,000 people and I'm in the middle of the woods.
Right.
And yeah, I'm like I never would have thought I would be here. But yeah, no, you just get these my friend Asia calls them divine appointments. And it's like you just get this urge to just go to this place or contact this person. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does feel it. And the way that we got this house was so magical and so like just it wasn't even on the market.
Right.
And
Right.
the realtor's name was Gina and the bank loan manager's name was Gina, and it was just like it was so weird, so many weird little synchronicities that like yeah, I totally
Yeah.
believe in that. So yeah, how did
Yeah.
you end up out in Portland?
Well, I'm in Bend. Um,
Oh, okay. I used to
uh,
live in Portland.
did you?
Hmm.
I love Portland. We always talk about,
Portland's great.
I mean, it's got its ups and downs. It was a really great place, right? And it was rough a couple years ago. It's still a
Mm,
little bit not the best place, but we still love it. We talk about maybe one day we might live there, but
mm,
right now we're in Bend. It's not a small town by any means. I mean, it's 100,000 people here, but we're on the east side of the Cascades, and it's high desert. We're kind of shut off from I-5 area, and
mm,
it's pretty chill out here. We really like it out here. Long story short, I came out here in 2000 to visit and just kind of get an eye out of everything, and I just always wanted to come out here, and I've wanted to move out here ever since. It
mm.
just took 17 years or so for everything to kind of fall into place to get out here.
Right.
Um, and so I got a really good job offer here, so we came here, and it fits perfectly. Like, so I know that that was meant to be for us to come out here. And then I just started to like get. I just love to explore, so I would just get in my Forerunner and I would just go drive down forest roads and explore everywhere. I would get up early in the morning and just drive around or go ride my bike, and started to find that I was being like divine. I say divinely guided, but it's like the more I get it, I understand how this is. It's like we just are. We think we're just like accidentally ending up in these places, but we're really not. Like we're just
Right.
kind of guided to these places, finding these things, and I'm like, oh wow, they're here. And it's like, wow, what a coincidence. But that really, it's kind of like they're just like, come on, come on, and then you show up and you. So I started to connect and realize that like all these places I was going to, there was Sasquatch, and now I find out that they're connected to each other. Then now I've realized that there's like this collective consciousness that they're all kind of connected to like a cloud, so they can all kind of like when you go into an area and there's Sasquatch, they can basically be like, yeah, we know him from over here. He's a good person, or yeah, we know
Mm,
her, so you kind of get like tagged, if you will, where they know you. And so they'll
mm.
come to you, kind of connect with you. And so that started happening out here. And uh, trying to make it as short of a story as possible.
Oh, we got
So
time.
I know,
However,
but it's so much. It just kind of like, you
yeah.
know what I mean? It
Maybe
just
we'll do
branches
a
out.
part two.
Okay. So the first time we were here, we were going to go camping, and this was like maybe 2 months after we moved here, and there's still a lot of snow on the ground in the high mountains, and it was early May, and so we were like, okay, well, we'll just go try to find a spot. So we drove down this one road for a while, and then it was like closed for the winter still, and they hadn't opened it up because when they open it up, they have to plow it out, and
Hmm.
so um, we were like, crap. So we turned around and we were like, let's just go drive down these forest roads and see if we can find a spot. So we found a spot after about an hour of driving. We found this like cool little lake. There's still snow everywhere. It's really nice, very remote. And so we sit down, we start making this little campfire. We figured out we were going to set up our tent and everything. And it just started getting really cold, like all of a sudden.
Mm,
And we were like, my sons were really young at the time. And I was like, I don't know if we're prepared to get this cold, with the kids. Like if it was us, we'd be all right. So we get ready to go and we're like, all right, let's just go home. We'll come back in a couple of weeks. Maybe it'll warm up a little bit. So I go to the Forerunner, and I was parked on the side of like this small forest road. I go around to my side of the like the driver's side. My wife's getting in the passenger side, and when I walk around to the driver's side, two individuals come running through the woods, right up to the tree line, like right to where I was. It was like,
Mm.
you know, and they stopped right there, but we couldn't see them because they were still inside the trees. And my wife stood up on the like the sideboard or what, like the door sill, and she like stood up and looked over at me, and she was like, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I heard that." I was like, "They're right here." And
Yeah.
they there was like nothing going on. There was no noise other than that. And I said, "Thank you for letting us share this place with you. You know, we hope to come back and maybe we can connect." So we left, and that ended up being one of my spots. Kept going back, and one night I was camping by myself there, and I closed my eyes, and maybe 5 seconds after I closed my eyes, I got a lot of stuff had happened up until that, and they were letting me know they were there. They were always leaving me things. They were doing wood knocks. They were like breaking things around me and just letting me know they were there. But this night, I guess they felt comfortable enough with me to like show themselves. So I was laying down and I just closed my eyes to go to sleep, and I got a vision of a male, and it was
Mm.
like people like to say it's imagination, right? Like, oh, you just imagine it, but it's like no, this was crystal clear
Mm.
face of a male Sasquatch, and I like it like in I can still see his face right now. Every time I close my eyes, I still see his face, and he was just looking at me, and then maybe for 10 seconds I got to look at him, and we just kind of looked at each other, and then I saw he went away, and then a female showed up, and she was it's weird to say, but she was so pretty.
Mm.
She had such a feminine human face. And I was taken aback by how pretty she was because I wasn't
Mm.
expecting that. And I remember
Right.
being like, oh, okay. And then,
Right.
um, but the thing is, like, I remember thinking how, like, I was surprised by how human she looked, but she still had, like, you know, like hair, like, not around her face so much, but like,
Yeah.
she still had like hair on the sides of her neck and like her shoulders and everything, but her face was not covered in hair. His had like a beard that came up to here. He didn't have a mustache or anything, but he was very like primal man looking.
Mm.
She was really like human looking. And
Yeah.
then, but I don't remember her face. I just remember like now when I think about it, I don't remember her face. But
Mm.
I think if I saw her now, I'd remember her. But I remember his face like crystal clear. Like if I saw him, there's no doubt I can remember.
I've heard from some people like there's a difference between the ancient ones and well, I mean there's all different sorts of Sasquatch. But who was I talking to? I think it was Kalani
Okay,
Lapsaritis, and he was telling me about the differences between the ancient ones and the Sasquatch. And he said that it was like for the ancient ones, there's like there's no hair or anything like that on the face. It looks like a human face
right.
basically, and the rest of it is has
Yeah.
hair.
So the
But
ones that I've seen, I can totally. I saw a gray one in Washington near Mount
mm,
Rainier in 2023, and he had a human face, and he was not very
okay.
tall. He was maybe 7 foot, 7.5 feet.
Yeah, the guys that my friends here, they're smaller. They are not like the gigantic, 14-foot big guys like out,
Yeah.
I don't know, in other places. They what I started seeing at first where it was so I was telling you I live in the middle of nowhere, very 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 rural, and it's very snowy. It's very cold in the wintertime, and I have a spot that I go to that's pretty far out, and I was probably about 2 miles into this wooded area with my wife, and we had our dogs with us, and I started seeing these tiny little footprints in the snow, small, like
Yeah.
very, it's like I don't know, smaller than my feet even, like maybe size 5 or something. And I
Hmm.
was like, "Are you seeing this? This is crazy. These are bare foot tracks in the
Right.
snow. It's like, I don't know, February or something and super cold out in the middle of nowhere." And then I would see like 5 of them and then it would stop and then half a mile and then others would start up and then 5 footprints and it would stop or something. but it seemed like they were getting smaller. And by the time we got back to the van, they were like child sized. It
Yeah.
was so bizarre. They were like little children, bare footprints in the snow in the woods, and like that was kind of my very first introduction to all this. But it was just I couldn't even process it. It was like,
Right.
this is so strange. I'm not even going to think about this because
Right.
it's too weird. Why would somebody bring their toddler out here with bare feet in the middle of the winter? And yeah, but then they started like banging on my roof, and all this other high strangeness started. And yeah, it sounds similar to what you've dealt with.
Yeah.
But it's so
Well,
cool. Like, it's so fun.
it
I
is.
love
It's so
it.
cool. And I love the fact that we all have these like commonalities in our stories, but they're all so different at the same time. Right?
Hmm.
We all have our different unique experiences. But so when you saw those little footprints, had you had any like thoughts about Sasquatch at that point, or was it kind of like the beginning stages of it?
Well, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Sasquatch and with
Okay.
The Loch Ness Monster, and not so much like alien ETs, but with ghosts and with like ley lines and like ancient European castles and like the stone tape theory, all this weird stuff that like little kids probably would not normally know about. But for me it was ghosts and Bigfoot, and I had a copy of Harry and the Hendersons on VHS that I wore out. I literally like it snapped eventually because I watched it so many times. But yeah, and I had all these books and I was just obsessed with it. And then I don't know, probably about 10 or 11 or something like that. Um, I kind of just put it all away and I was like, okay, I'm going to be interested in other things now because none of this is real.
Right.
None of it. And so, yeah. And so, you know, went throughout my life and kind of opened up to like energy work and spirituality and stuff, probably fairly recently, I'd say 2019. And then we had COVID, and I had a year and a half to kind of reflect, and it
Yeah. Yeah.
was an intense time. But yeah, and so we ended up here, and I was doing, like I said, I was working with a mentor at the time, and she had a very deep connection with Sasquatch people, and we were doing this work together, and kind of that the footprints had happened a few months before, or maybe like a month before that, but I had that was the furthest thing from my mind. I really thought it was like some hippies bringing their kid out in the woods or something. Like, I had no idea.
Right.
And so I was working with my friend, and then I was sleeping in this room one night, and it was probably about 5 in the morning, and I there were all these huge booms, bangs, and like rolling sounds coming from my roof. And this house is like it 4 stories, including the roof. So obviously there was nobody there. And it like the dogs were terrified. My wife wakes up and she's like, "What the heck is going on? What's going on?" You know, because we have there are like really intense thunderstorms and windstorms and stuff. So we've had trees fall and, you know, damage the roof. But I went outside and there was nothing. And I honestly, because I had been seeing like light ships and having like contact experience for a few years prior, and so I assumed it was like ETs or something.
Yeah.
I had no idea, but I told my friend about it, and she was like, "Well, it's the Sasquatch people, and they have a message for you. They want you to love yourself more."
Yeah. Right.
And that like hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, "Oh,
Yep.
you guys, you see me."
Yep.
So, and so yeah,
That's
I started. Yeah,
that's a spot on message from them too. That's
yep,
exactly what they want. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so I just started going out and into nature, and I eventually found that they live very close to my house, which is I don't, it's weird. You would think they would be out in some like state park or something, but
Hmm.
they're about, I don't know, 5 minutes away from where I live. And so
Hmm.
I go out there during at night because like you, I'm, trying to work through my fears of the dark and all this stuff. And um, oh, I told you I had a good story from the other night. So I haven't really had any like physical experiences with them in a few months because it's been winter time. It's been really cold and
Right.
I've been busy. Anyway, I got out of my job. I work nights and I was feeling kind of low, kind of depleted and just kind of depressed and I somehow the idea popped into my mind, let's go out to the woods. You haven't been out there in a while. It would be nice to go say hi. And so I went out there and it's like a baseball field, but then there's it's a trailhead and the trails go probably about 10, 15 miles, I would say. It's a fairly large area of woods that they
Mhm.
live in. And I went out there and it was a very clear night and it was just, God, it felt so good to just smell the trees and it was silent. It was just beautiful. And um, I just said, "Hey guys, here I am." And then all of a sudden, this big yellow orb shoots out from behind me into the woods. And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I got the I got the love bomb and everything. And
Yeah.
then I felt I was wearing like big heavy snow boots and stuff, but I felt from my feet all the way up just this like heavy vibration. And I was like, "Oh, thanks guys. I really needed that. That was so great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much." And yeah, it was a beautiful moment. And then I came home and I fell asleep and I woke up in the morning and I came back into this room and I don't know if you can see it, but I have this, it's up here by my little Arcturian guy. He's like a little rubber Sasquatch. You see him?
I think so. Is he like
Yeah,
a
it's like
amber
little,
color?
he's like a little brown guy
Yeah,
right
yeah,
up
I see him.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the floor, in the middle of the room. And I was like, you guys. Oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
funny. So
I love
yeah,
that.
they're great. And I've gotten like audio recordings from them in here. I've gotten like grunts and stuff. I'll just turn on my phone and just ask them to show up and I'll hear like ooh, ooh, or like weird vibe like what sounds like a huge moth almost. It's so
Okay.
strange. It's like
Oh,
it's all brrr,
yeah.
like buzzing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
So,
got that a lot on my audio recorder, and I think it's their
oh, okay.
energy. I think it's their energy
Oh,
field. Like this,
okay.
like the buzzing of their energy.
Mm,
That
that's interesting.
it's maybe it's something the recorders can pick up like audibly that we can't. That's like not in
Mm,
our ears. Because I've had that where they walk up to the audio recorder and it starts to get really staticky and zap and pop and crackle.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
That's awesome. I used to do a lot of audio when I first started trying to figure out things, and because I don't know, I just always liked it, and they seemed to react well with it. They seemed to like kind of engage with it, and um, I learned a lot from it. But I kind of stopped doing it. I kind of want to
me
get
too.
back into it a little bit. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, that's awesome though, because yeah. So when I saw her, well, I don't know, man. I just want to
Oh,
like touch
yeah.
on so I want to touch on so many things. Yes.
Like I said,
So
we can do a second episode too. So it's
okay.
like, don't, no
Well, I'll
pressure.
finish that story. So when yeah, I saw her. She showed me herself for about 10 seconds. And then when she left and I didn't see her anymore, then a little one came in. And so
Oh,
he had a I don't like it, like I don't mean this in like a disrespectful way at all. He had like a very like football shaped head.
mm.
And it kind of got me off guard. Again, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. It was almost like Stewie from Family Guy.
Yeah.
And I think about it, I don't know necessarily if it was the shape of his head or if it was like the way his um the hair stopped around the edge or bordered his face, and maybe that's what it
Mm,
was. Like maybe his cheekbones or whatever just made it look like that. But I remember thinking like, oh wow, he's got like a interesting shaped face, I guess you could
mm,
say, you know, like I said.
right.
But so the other little one I saw too that was in my bedroom when I was young, kind of the same thing. So I don't know if it's something with the young ones where they have like their head shapes or you know like a certain way, and then they grow up and it kind of forms more of like a I don't know because I'd be curious to see what he looks like now. There's a lot of stuff that dovetails off this story and a lot of things that have happened since then because that was in 2020.
Mm,
So I still communicate with that group. That was how we made our connection. Um, they
okay.
they still talk to me, and I actually just met a guy who was kind of having encounters in a similar area. And while I was talking to him, they told me the word peacemaker, that group, as if like they, and I got this some understanding with it because sometimes when they communicate with me, they'll tell me like one or two, maybe three words, but there's like this whole understanding that's attached to it, if that makes
Mm,
sense. So they'll
mm-hmm,
say like peacemaker, and it was like an understanding that came with it was like we would like for you guys to come to this area and we want to connect with you and bridge the gap between us and you, if that
mm,
makes sense. And it was like this
mm-hmm,
understanding, and it all came in the same amount of time I heard the word peacemaker, it was like all that understanding was there. And I was
mm.
like, okay, got it, you know.
Awesome.
So
And that's the place in Ontario?
no, that's here. That's here.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, that's when I'm really bad at this. I jump all over the
You're
place.
not
So
bad
it's
at this.
kind
Come on, you have amazing stories. It's fine.
but there's
People
so much
love to
stuff.
hear these.
I know, but there's so much stuff in between them and I jump around. So it does get kind of confusing. So that
Mm,
happened here. That is probably a 45-minute drive from my house. From if I leave my front porch, I drive up a little bit and I go down this dirt road for 20 minutes or so, and there's an
mm,
area that this is at. And on the other side of the so if you were to go as a crow flies maybe 12, 10, 12 miles over the
mm,
crest of the Cascades on the western side, more towards like the McKenzie River Valley near Eugene. There's a group there that I've had stuff happen with, and I sometimes wonder if it's the same group. I haven't seen them, but they've come into our camp. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and somebody, I was in my tent. I heard a wood knock right outside of camp, and it was like late three, maybe four in the morning, and it was like top, 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 like would knock. And I woke up
mm,
and I had this type of stuff happen in that area a couple times. Um, and I woke up and I was like, okay, somebody's here. And I just laid there and listened. And we had been camping. It was early in the season, so the mosquitoes were really bad. So that whole day before we had a fire and we had been chopping green um, tree branches to throw on the fire to smoke out our area to get the mosquitoes to kind of chill out.
mm,
And so we were chopping wood all day. We said we had this little hatchet and we would just like chop branches up, throw them on the fire, get the smoke going pretty good. And so that night when I heard that knock, I laid there and then I heard somebody pick up the hatchet and start chopping wood with it. And in my head, I got the impression that um a sentinel or like a maybe it was a mother or maybe it was like an older teenager that was kind of like watching, and there was a juvenile that wanted to do like was like, oh, I want to do that because they had been watching us chop wood all day. And so
mm.
I
Oh,
got
that
this,
looks fun.
yeah, so I got this picture in my head of like somebody's knocking saying like, hey, we're gonna come in, and I was like, cool, go ahead. And then they went in and someone was just like pretending to chop wood with the hatchet for like a
Mm,
minute or two, and then it stopped and they left. um
right.
yeah, so just stuff
That's
like
so
that.
cute. I love the
It
little
is.
guys. I've gotten
Hmm.
since I saw those little footprints, I've seen others, and there's God, every time I see the little ones, I just like I squeal with with excitement because they're
Hmm.
so cute. And I
Yeah.
do get this. I haven't seen a little one in person, but I've seen them, when I see the footprints, I get I get an image flash in my mind and they're so freaking cute.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
just love them. I've had one physical sighting, but like this stuff I'm still actually pretty new to this stuff. So, yeah, and he wasn't very big. I'd say like 7 feet, maybe about 7 feet tall.
Okay.
But I was walking with my dogs and, I was walking down this old logging road in one of the areas that I like to frequent. And, I turned around to tell my one of my guys to hurry up, and I heard the word wait, like wait, look, wait. And so I just kept looking down the road, and I'm like, why am I supposed to wait? And it was probably about 90, yeah, it was about 90 degrees out. And I saw this, which is really hot for up here. And, I saw this all black figure walk across the road. And at first I was like, who in the heck is wearing like all black in the middle of summer? Like that's insane. And
Right.
then I looked again and he went, into the other side of the woods. And like my whole mind was just blank. Like it was just like
Hmm.
I didn't just see that. And it
Yeah.
wasn't there was no fear or anything like that, but it was just like no, no,
Right.
that couldn't have been.
Right.
But yeah, yeah. And later I heard that it was a gift for me, and it was really special. It was amazing to see. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would have thought that I would have felt something. I don't know what I would have felt, but it seems like it was such a like a moment, like such a huge moment, and it was just like, oh, hey, there he is.
Right.
It's
Right.
weird because people are like, you have these incredible experiences, and you talk about them like they're nothing, and I'm like, no, it's not nothing. It's just it feels so natural at this
Hmm.
point, and it kind
A
of
hundred
always
percent.
did.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. Because the first when yeah, it is interesting, right? Because I don't know how to explain that part, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the first physical sighting that I had after my childhood one was at that place that I was telling you about that we used to go camp at. And I
Mm,
was standing there talking to some people, and it was in the middle of the day. And normally the stuff there will happen either in at night or dusk or in the dawn time, like when the lighting's not so bright. But this was in the middle of the day. I was standing there talking to somebody, and there was a kind of like a grassy clearing, and then there was the woods. And as I'm talking to the person, I saw a black one, run from the tree line across the grass to like this. I don't know. It's a state park, so there was like a building, like a shed with like an electrical thing and some water things running into it. I don't know what it
hmm.
was, but it was like a storage shed or something. And I watched him run from the tree line across the grass behind the shed, and he was so fast. And I
Wow.
remember I just caught him running, and it wasn't even one of those things where I interrupted the conversation to say,
You're
I
just
just
like,
saw
oh.
one. Yeah, I just looked and saw him and then continued the conversation with the person. And I think about that now and I'm like, it's just so weird. Like, what is that? Uh we just don't, you would think that you would have been like, I just saw one, but it was just like, oh, there he is. And
Yeah, I don't know. Is it a disconnect or is it just like this acceptance that oh, hey, that's my buddy. Like I don't maybe it's a little bit of both. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think they just build up to it. Because when I saw him, this was after when I was talking the story about, getting the love bomb and stuff. So this was probably 2 or 3 years after that, right? So I had already had a lot of stuff happen. Like I had invited them to our house, and they started coming to our
Mm,
house, and they would like knock on the windows of our second story bedroom. And my wife was
mm.
starting to get kind of like, I don't like this. Like this is kind of freaking me out, and all these things were happening. So I think at that point, I was just so used to them being around that when I finally saw one, I was more like, ha, gotcha. Like I know
Yeah.
that they've always been around, but I was like, "Ha, saw you,"
There you
you
are.
know. Yeah.
Right. I actually I invited them over to my house. I mean they'd already been here, but like I they love apples. And
Hmm.
I used to bring apples to the woods all the time, but I have an apple tree and they were starting to fall. The dogs would like eat all the rotten apples and get tipsy. And I was like, ugh, there's too many apples in this backyard.
Yeah.
And so I was out in the woods and I was like, hey, if you guys want to come to my house, I have tons of apples. Come and eat the apples, please. And and that night, so we had all the windows open because it was summer, and I was in the bedroom with my wife. She was going to bed, and we were, snuggling, and all of a sudden, the whole room filled up with this like skunk, skunky sort
Hmm.
of smell. And we have
Hmm.
skunks, like there are skunks in the neighborhood, and so I was like, oh, gross. I mean, it wasn't gross, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was very powerful. And I was like, ew, this is gross, whatever. And then I had to let the dogs outside the last time before I went to bed. So we went outside and I went out in the backyard and the smell was gone. There was nothing. There was no skunk smell outside at all. And I
Right.
was like, I wonder if that's my buddies. And I sat down in one of the lawn chairs and I was looking up at the sky and I saw there were a couple of little orbs playing around in the trees, like just like little tiny guys. And I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, because I see orbs and stuff back there all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I went back in the house, went to sleep, woke up the next morning and came outside. And there was an apple with a giant bite taken out of it. And it was like shoved in one of the crooks of the trees about 8 feet up. And I took a
Yeah.
picture of it because I just broke out laughing because they're so funny. I feel like they have a great sense of humor.
Oh, they have the best. Yeah, their sense of humor is it's a next level. Like I say, they have
Mm,
like a 4D sense of humor, right? It's like four dimensional because they
right.
do things and it's funny, but it's like it really makes you think some of the things
Mm.
they do where you're like, oh my God, like, and you're like, wait, how'd you do that? Like, um, I I have a
It's like they
story.
pick
So
your brain and they can figure out.
yeah, they do. Yeah, they'll do stuff, and you're like, what? So in the same camp that I was at when I saw the gray one in 2023, uh, on the way up to camp, Arla sent me a message and it said, "Look for the color yellow."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay." And I don't and, like Arla will get messages from them sometimes, and it's like, "Hey, tell him this." And so she'll message me, and so I was driving with, I got the message like, "Look for the color yellow," or "Pay attention to the color yellow," something like that. And that was it. And so the whole time I was there at camp, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for. So I just everything that was yellow, like there was some warblers, some like birds that would fly by sometimes, and I'd be like, oh, they're yellow, you know. So, anyways, like the whole like 4 or 5 days I was there. So one night I go to sleep, and I don't remember anything happening this night. There was a couple nights where they like ran by my tent and brushed up against my tent, and they would make themselves known. This night, nothing really happened. So I woke up that morning and I just felt like something was kind of off and I didn't know what it was. So I was like feeling and I felt in my ear and I was like, what the hell's in my ear? And I pull out like an earplug and I was like, oh, it's actually right here. I have it on my little table. And so I pull out the earplug, I lay it on my pillow and I just like close my eyes again and I'm like resting, trying to figure out like what was that, blah blah. And it just hit me. And it was like the earplug's yellow.
Hmm.
And and I was like, oh, in my head, I was like, oh, haha, funny. And then I'm like, wait, how the hell did they do that? Like, and there's my earplugs, I know that, and it was in my bag. I don't like using them because I like being able to listen to everything that's going on, right?
Oh, so you didn't put it in your ear when you went to
No,
sleep?
no, I don't like using them at all because I like being able to hear everything, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I woke up and I was like, how the hell did they put an earplug on my ear? I'm like, did they put an earplug in, or like, did they get me to put an earplug in my ear? Like, so, anyways, yeah. So like their sense of humor sometimes it's like You're just like, okay, okay, you know.
That's so funny. Yeah, I got an acorn from them, and I don't know how I knew it was from them, but it was like, when was it? It was in the springtime. So, acorns don't grow fully until the fall and, fall from the
Right,
tree. And it was in the spring, and I was like walking from my backyard to the van in my driveway, and there was one single solitary acorn that was like it was, the right side up, and it was right in the middle of the driveway, and somehow I was just like, that's from them. I know it's from them.
right.
And
Yep,
I picked it up and I felt it, and it's like all this energy just like went all throughout my body, like from the acorn. It's like the acorn had this like crazy
yep,
energy to it. And
yep.
so yeah, I kept it because it was like, yeah, all I had to do was touch it and be like, whoa, wow,
Yeah,
that's one powerful acorn.
yeah. It took me a
Yeah.
while though to understand that, but yeah, they 100% do that. We'll put
Mm,
like like energy signature or something into things or onto things when they're
mm,
meant for us. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. I I don't know, man. I just have so many cool stories. Yeah, so when they started coming to our house, in Georgia before we moved here, s- I try to get people to understand like how the relationship works. And it's like this, I would go to their spot where I knew they were in the middle of the day, and I would try to get them to interact with me. And sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't, um, sometimes I would leave and go back to my car, and they would, do a wood knock from the area that I was just in, and
Mm,
just letting me know, like, hey, we were here. We just didn't feel like talking, or whatever it is, like come back later. So they're like, all right. And so then they would start coming to our house like 2 or 3 in the morning. You would hear them knock on the window or like knock on the side of the house and just break a tree branch, just letting you know, like, hey, we're outside. And then I would do the same thing. I'd be like, I don't feel like it. I'm tired. I'm not coming out there. I will say, I don't regret much, but that's one of the things I do regret is those nights when they were outside and I was like, I don't feel like getting out of bed 'cause I'm tired. But just having them right there wanting to interact with me and not going
mm.
outside to do it. But this one night, we had this neighbors that lived across the street because we were in a suburb. We were in a suburban neighborhood in the end of a cul-de-sac on like a road with other houses. So
Right.
this was outside of Atlanta, and we're not remote at all. They're just in that area. They just walk through the neighborhoods and just go in the woods behind the houses. Similar layout to where I lived in Northern Virginia. They're just meandering through the woods in these areas. And
Mm,
so there was a dog that was barking, and he would just bark all night because the neighbors would leave him tied to a tree. And
mm.
this one night, I went out and I rolled the trash cans down to the end of our driveway, and the dog started barking at me. And so I came back in the house and I told my wife, I was like, we got to do something about this dog because once he starts barking, he just barks the whole night. And it's not cool because the neighbors just leave him tied up to this tree in the front yard, and like he stays out there all night long
That
and he
sucks.
barks at everything, and it sucked. And I was like, we should call animal control. And so we talked about that late, like while we were getting ready to go to bed. So we went to sleep, and later that night, I heard um, a knock at my window on my side of the bed, and
Mm,
so I was like, okay, they're here. Normally they would knock on the other window that faced the woods. My window faced the backyard and there was a fence. And so I knew when they knocked on that window that they were trying to get my attention, specifically to let me know something. Because normally they knocked on the other window. So I sat there and listened, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna see what they want. And then I heard this loud tree break, like crack, and then it was just nothing. And I was like, that's weird. Like they broken branches and stuff before, but it was just like, why would they knock on the window and then break a tree and then leave? So the next morning I get up. I fell back asleep. I didn't think anything of it after that point. I got up the next morning. I get in my car and getting ready to go to work. And it was, the sun hadn't come up yet. It was just starting to come up. There's just enough light to see. And I get in my car, I start driving down the driveway, and I look and I see that my trash cans that I rolled down at the end of the driveway were both in the way, like they had been moved to the middle of the driveway and they were facing the other direction.
Hmm.
And so I had to get out, and I was like, haha, guys, funny, funny. So I had to get out, and I walked and I took the trash cans and I put them back to where I had put them the night before. And I just looked up at across the street at that tree that the dog was tied to,
Yeah, of
and that
course.
tree had been broken,
Yeah.
and they had taken the dog in. So the neighbors had to take the dog inside because the tree had been
They love
broken.
dogs.
They do. And so I just looked at the tree and I was like, holy shit, like they solved my problem for me. Now the
Hmm.
tree can't be used for the dog anymore, and the dog was never tied to that tree ever again. And so yeah, I just like that type of thing to me is just so cool because it's like
Yeah.
it just shows how connected they are to us, right? Like because they're like listening to us and they're like, how can we help? And they're like, oh, we can fix this ourselves, let's just go get this tree. And they didn't hurt the dog at all. The dog's fine. They just,
No, I don't think
you
they
know,
would.
no, not at all.
Maybe some of them would, but not, I mean, not the ones that I interact with. They've actually come in and done healings on my dogs before.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like
No,
they're
they're not,
just,
yeah, they're not going to hurt unless a dog, I guess, was like attacking one of the little ones or something. I would, something like that. Or if it was an
yeah,
aggressive dog. But this was like a very clear, like, we'll handle this for you. You don't have to call animal
yeah.
control. Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love that. I, um, so I was doing those recordings for a little while, and that was like, I don't know, it was pretty much when the stuff first started happening. I was watching Mike Patterson's videos and I was kind of chatting with him, and he was like, "Yeah, this is really worked out. If you want to try it, they might, respond to you." So I was doing these videos and getting the stuff on the audio, and like I was in this room one night just hanging out, and I heard a growl from the corner. I had my headphones in. I was listening to music, but I heard like a very loud growl. It was like "Roar." Like it was like a cartoon growl almost. And it was so loud that my dog, one of them, she was laying on the couch. She kind of just like raised her head and then just flopped her head back down because they're so used to it now.
Right.
Like at first the energy really freaked them out, and I mean, they still go in the woods, and like when I can tell they're around, the dogs will kind of like shake themselves off and be like, "Oh, I can feel that energy. It's a little stressful." But
Right.
overall, I think they really like them. I think
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's a mutual sort of friendship. So, well, I guess what are we at? We're at 1 hour and 24 minutes. We should probably
Okay.
end this, and then, but we'll do another one. We'll do a
Okay.
second episode. And yeah, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I'll
No,
tell
I
you
did
that.
too. I like your stories are very, very familiar. Yeah. So I think
Great.
there's a lot of commonalities in those. And
Mm,
then yeah, because this all I should have probably just stuck to this stuff before it came to Oregon because there was just so much to unpack. Everything that I
mm,
learned in Georgia and everything in the cabin. This whole Oregon thing has been like a whole other chapter. But yeah, it's turned into this whole thing of healing, um, getting me to connect with myself and my my true self. And I I I always forget to mention this part, but in Georgia, while I was like in the midst of like trying to connect to them and find physical connections to them and get to know them better and everything, like literally one day someone said to me, why do you want to why do you want to know what we are when you don't even know what you are?
mm. Ah,
And
ah,
yeah, and I was
yeah.
like, okay, you're right. And then yeah, so that opened up a whole other avenue of healing, right?
Mm.
So
Loving yourself more, knowing
yeah,
yourself more. Yeah.
that's
They're
literally their
masters.
message. That's their
Yeah.
message. Love is like, we love you, we want you to love you, you got to figure out who you are. And I think that's a lot, goes back to a lot of like why I didn't see them as much then, but now I can see them more. It's just like we want you to get to know who you are a little bit more before we'll start opening up to you. And now it's like, I've seen a few of them now, and it's just such a cool trip. And yeah, I just want people to open up to the paranormal woo stuff and just get to ride this ride for what it's worth, and stop trying to just gain evidence of their existence and make like a
Mm,
connection, like with
yeah.
yourself, not just with them, just like with yourself.
Yeah. I feel like
And
that's their biggest message is that they want us to know ourselves
yeah,
and to know how powerful we are and how multidimensional and brilliant we are because I think I would say every single one of us walks around with hardly any idea of who we are. I was just
oh
talking to my wife about this earlier today about how like you said earlier, when you're a kid, you're totally open and you are just this like sponge, this big emotional sponge, and you soak in all all this programming, all this distortion, all this like don't rock the boat, don't
right,
brag, don't love yourself, that's all selfish. And
right,
you just learn all these distorted behavioral patterns from your parents, no blame, but like from school, from TV, and you just kind of learn, you kind of look around yourself and you see different aspects that you think will help you get friends or help you be successful or whatever, and you just like kind of put all of these different layers of this mask onto yourself and you kind of like you were saying, like you build your personality, you build your
right,
avatar as the older you get. And then you spent, well, for me anyway, I spent half my life just in this thick ass shell of a personality armor,
yep,
just protective like coping mechanism on top of protective coping mechanism, and you have no clue who you are. And
right,
then something like an awakening or a kundalini or whatever experience happens and it kind of blows you open, and then you have to admit you have no clue who you are.
right,
You have no
yep,
clue what you are. You don't
yep,
know what your preferences are, what your truth is, what your authenticity is, because you've been hiding this whole time. And yeah, it's a trip. It's a
yeah,
trip. And that's what they want us to do. They want us to figure this stuff out.
yeah. That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's why they do the things they do that don't really make much sense. Um,
Yeah.
they love children because children are authentic, right? They're
Mm,
real. They're not conditioned or programmed yet, right? And then
right.
so yeah, that's really they're like, I don't want to say they're the OG light workers or like way showers, but they really are like they're the earthbound way showers and light workers in awakening. Like they want us to
Light
awaken.
bearers.
Yeah, I mean they really
Yeah.
do, like they literally shine light out of their eyes. They turn into
Mm,
orbs, they literally want us to find our inner light. And um yeah, I mean it's like them and star people and I mean elementals, the fae folk, like all of them, they all work together in a way that it's like they really just, I mean we're here right now during this, we're in the midst of this mass awakening right now, and they're just trying to help get us to wake up. I mean, they're doing their part. So
yeah.
yeah, I definitely would love to do another show
Okay.
sometime. Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do a part two and we'll finish. I don't know. You'll tell more incredible stories.
yeah, I've got some cool ones. But yeah, it is.
Awesome.
I really got into like the healing part of it because I feel like that's the stuff they really want us to talk about.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what we can talk about next time is the role of healer and your journey with that.
yeah.
And
That's really like they want us to share those things too. It's not just the stories about them. They want us to talk about this, like how to, like what you were just touching on, like
mm,
figuring out who you are and doing your your shadow work and going into the guts of everything that you've been trying to run away from half your life, and just digging into it and sitting with it.
That's the meat and potatoes. That's
Yep,
the gold.
that's the
Yeah.
stuff right there. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, my friends, and my new friend, Sam Chandler, I'm going to end this right now because I don't know any other way of ending it other than to just end it. So I
Right.
hope you guys liked it. And if you made it all the way through and you want to like and subscribe, go for it. I would love that. So, okay. I'll see you guys later.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Oh,